became a visiting fellow at the Woodrow Wilson Institute, Princeton University, New Jersey, in 1984 to 1985 academic year, received a doctorate degree from the University of Benin in 1989, is married to Eugenia Olajumoke Ni Pereira, December 1964, and they're blessed with 3 sons and 4 daughters. Our guest joined the External Affairs Division of Nigerian Civil Service in April 1957, and before independence served in London and in the British High Commissions in Canberra, Australia, and in New Zealand. He was a member of the founding staff of the Nigerian Permanent Mission at the United Nations in New York, 1960 to 1962, and posted back to the ministry in 1962 as head of division, and became the Nigerian member of the Six Nation Provisional Secretariat of the Organization of African Unity in 1963. At his request, he transferred to the Home Service in 1964 and was appointed Federal Permanent Secretary in 1965. He was barely 32 years old at the time, or 31 years old at the time. And he served in that capacity mainly in the Ministry of Industries, 1966 to 71, Ministry of Mines and Power, 1971 to 75, and was very, very involved in developing policies, plans, and liaising with external private investors for the industrial and oil and gas sectors in Nigeria. He served as chairman and director of many boards, became a member of the People's Democratic Party in 1998, and campaigned to become the flag bearer. However, he was appointed chief economic advisor to President Obasanjo, and served in office from 1999 to 2001. He had been much earlier special economic advisor to Shehu Shagari during his brief second term that was ended by the military coup d'etat. He also served as secretary, which is Minister, Petroleum and Mineral Resources in Chief Ernest Shonekan's Transitional Council under military president Ibrahim Babangida from 1992 to 1993. Please welcome with me a distinguished King's College old boy, Uzoma Philip Asiodu, CFR, CON. You are most welcome, sir. And
Florian College. Thank you very much, Florian College.
Yes, sir. How's Auntie? I hope she's well.
Very well indeed. Thank you.
There are many people from all over the world watching this. I see Mrs. Oyewe and Emilia smiling in her red turtleneck all the way from Maryland, watching this at this time. Thank you very much, sir. I see Ibrahim Palm from Singapore, Sri Lanka, or somewhere.
Really?
And my dear Kofi Koka, she's in the US. Shade is in South Africa, and my sister Tolu is in Lekki. I think that's it. And quite a lot of people on the platform. Bambo is in London, and they're all listening and watching and waiting to hear what you will say. Thank you very much for accepting to be on the platform. It's a day that I've been looking forward to. And I know that today you will give us a little bit of a background as to how Nigeria got to where it was, what your expectations were in 1960 when the Union Jack was lowered and the green, white, green flag was lifted up, and how come we now find ourselves where we are in Nigeria. I think that is a good place to start as we begin to think of the way ahead. Over to you, sir.
Well, thank you very much. Where do you want me to start? You said background and all that?
Yes.
Well,
in 1960, what were you all looking forward to? 1960, you were 26 years old. You were in the federal service, or you were in the foreign service, and we're all excited about Nigeria. So
You know,
what were you looking for? Yes, sir.
it wasn't only us.
Yeah.
In fact, as you see in the CV you read out, I was in New York from March 1960, and we were preparing. We hired a place. We were preparing for the permanent mission of Nigeria to the United Nations. But since Nigeria was not yet independent, I was listed on the British list. I was a member of the British mission from
Can you all hear me?
Can you hear me?
You can't hear me.
You can't hear me too? I can hear you.
You froze for a few minutes there. Go ahead, sir.
Well, I said I was in New York actually, preparing to have the Nigerian mission. I said it was not just us in Nigeria. In fact, unprecedentedly, many African countries had become independent, particularly the French-speaking African, just before us. But for Nigeria, the whole day was devoted to our admission. Security Council met in the morning, and in the afternoon, the General Assembly formally ratified our admission and listened to our Prime Minister, Tafawa Balewa. And he made a very good speech, saying, of course, that our independence would be meaningless without the whole of Africa becoming independent. So he committed ourselves to working for the redemption, the independence of the whole of Africa. Also, great were the expectations about our economic evolution. In fact, as you know very well, under the regional self-government, all the three regions, Northern region, Western region, Eastern region, had made tremendous progress. Economy was growing before independence at over 6% per annum, population about 2.83%. So there was appreciation. And you remember the basic education programs in the East and West, free primary education, automatic scholarships in the North for anybody. So the expectations were great, and our resources were so richly endowed. Minerals, arable land, sea coast, energy resources, and all that. So we had great expectations. And in fact, when we now were formally admitted, and they were talking about helping Africa and so on and so on, at that time, we had enough balance in our reserves and so on and so on, thanks to the prudent management of our resources before independence and immediately after, that we in fact contributed to the funds. We refused to be on the side of receivers. Different case now. And then independence started, and as I told you, we did our first post-independence plan, 1962 to 68. Those were the days people were committed to making proper plans, identifying projects, costing them, having them cited, so you could monitor what was happening, and we were full of expectations. Before then, as a student here, we had grown up reading Sixth Renaissance Africa, where Nigeria will be at the vanguard of African redemption, and so forth and so on. We'll talk about it later. The plans we had, which by 1999 latest, Nigeria would have exited from poverty, and Nigeria would have been quite a globally significant economy. But that was not to be because of certain developments. But we saw the politicians, that before independence, we had the Clifford's Constitution in 1922. Only Lagos with 3 representatives, Calabar with 1, had direct elections. to the Legislative Council. But even at that time, the Legislative Council could not legislate for the northern region, northern provinces. This was part of the manifestation of the things which the British officials in the north, they resisted for as long as they could. It's only under the Richards Constitution that we now had, from 1944 or so, a legislative council. But even that could not legislate, it would only advise. But for that, we all met together. It was the Macpherson Constitution and later on, the Littleton Constitution, which led to regional self-government for the East and the North, 1956, and then self-government for the North, 59. And I must say that those critical conferences in 54 and 57, 58, the politicians were able to reach compromises. And that led us to the emergence as an independent state on 1st October, 1960, full of hopes that we would use our resources properly as we had started and that we would exit from poverty. So that's the background, but did you want me to elaborate on anything?
So what went wrong, sir? We had so much hope in 1960, 1965, and so on and so forth, and we thought we'd have exited completely in 1999. But now in 2022, we are being reputed to be the poverty capital of the world. What, in your own opinion, sir, went wrong? Why didn't we push this through? We started seemingly so well.
It's very sad. But again, going back to developments before independence, well, I don't know how many of you are aware, but I want to give you a little example. In 1938, there was a crisis in the then only political party, so to speak. There was the Nigerian National Democratic Party of Abamakoli, but it was more concerned with Lagos affairs, But then you had the Nigerian National Youth Movement. And
sorry,
people
sir. Go ahead, sir. You froze a little bit. Yeah.
I wonder what's happening.
1938, there was a crisis. That's why we...
Yes, 1938, 38, crisis in Nigerian National Movement. Are you hearing me? Are you hearing me? Something wrong? My connection is freezing. No. What can you do?
All right. Well, you, sir.
I can hear you now.
Yeah, I can hear you also.
Okay.
You left off 1938, there was a crisis.
There was a crisis because, and I want to show you, to make this illustrate how sad it is, the ethnic divide we are having now. 1938, there was a crisis in the youth movement. The president, Sir Kofu Abayomi, was a doctor then, and he decided to go on a specialist course. So he had to resign. And by their rules, the vice president should succeed pending elections. But the Executive Council of the Youth Movement was dominated by Lagosians. And one of their leaders, Gomez, said Ijabuke ni Lui, because it was the demo of Ishara that should have succeeded. Say Ijabuke Otio, they had their own candidate. And what I want to tell you is that on that occasion, this was 1938. You can hear me?
Very
can
well,
you hear
sir.
me?
Yes, sir. Go
On
ahead,
that
sir.
occasion, Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, who with H.O. Davis and Estikoli and others were members of the youth movement, supported the demo of Ishara. Awolowo, who was from Ikene, 10 kilometers from Ishara or so, supported the Lagos candidate. He didn't support fellow Ijabu man, but who was the Lagos candidate? He was not a Yoruba man. He was an Estikoli. But in those days, when you ask a Lagosian, who is a Lagosian? You just smile, Amorawa, we know ourselves. Why? He was a Lagosian. He had lived all the time with the Coyotes. In fact, in the end, he married Fani Coyote's mother when the father died. And so that was the Lagos candidate. But what is remarkable, he was from Bayelsa originally, but he went to King's College, of course, like you do, like you did, and so forth and so on. Now, only 8 years later, that was 1930, 6 years later, that was 1938. 1944, when Chief Obafemi Awolowo published his book, Path to Nigerian Freedom, he now decided that Nigeria's future evolution, constitutionally and in government, must be based on ethnic origins. You see? And that led to a crisis and a breakup. Dr. Azikiwe eventually left NYM. Many of the Jabu people left, and later on, of course, Zik combined with Herbert Macaulay to found the NCNC, which was, for some time, the only nationwide political party. It wasn't even a party, it was an association where tribal groups, political parties could join to demand independence eventually. Now, it was after that that the action group was formed as a Yoruba party. And of course, immediately, the Northern People's Congress changed from being a cultural organization to a political party. And so this is why, unlike India and one or two other countries, we didn't get to independence under one united political party. We went under a tripod. And the impression was given that East and West could not work together. And that was very tragic for Nigeria, And so these days when we see people, you were in King's College, so I was, and when we meet ourselves, we are true to a school song, which says, though of many nations, we shall not forget that we are all brothers with a common debt, etc., etc. Now, this was sad, but it wasn't as bad as now, because even though the NCNC won the election to the Western Assembly in 1954, but it was 3 months before they assembled. And during those 3 months, the NCNC majority disappeared. And when Zik went to Ibadan, the assembly there, hoping to be leader of government business, he was surprised to see his majority become a minority. But that's not just that. It was then an electoral college. So although he had the largest number of votes from Lagos, and NCNC was in charge of Lagos and had zoned him and Adedonyi to represent Lagos in the House of Representatives, it was blocked by the Action Group. And Action Group proceeded to give very good governance, free primary education, farm settlement schemes, etc., etc. hospitals in every divisional headquarters, water supply. Despite good governance and all that, when there was direct election 3 years later, in 1957, to the House of Representatives, NCNC beat them. That's remarkable. But of course, at that time, unfortunately, it was, they could not unite. So we got into independence, as you say, on the basis of a tripod. This was going to be very, very disturbing, because there I was some months later in the United Nations. And there had been a plebiscite in southern and northern Cameroons, before independence. That sort of plebiscite resulted in the British administered part of Togoland remaining with Ghana. In Nigeria, the northern provinces, because Sardauna campaign, remained with the north. But in the southern Cameroons, people did not care. Neither the prime minister nor now Okpara as the head of the NCNC. A little expenditure, a little effort, we might have won. But the point is that there in the United Nations, the action group now sent a delegation under Rosiji to campaign that the UN should not recognize the verdict in northern Cameroons, because it was going to affect their calculation of the number of votes. Of course, we managed to go over that. That's a different story. But you see, that type of excessive politicization, if you like, of issues was not very helpful. But really what prevented us saying was that when we had that first military coup of January 1966, it destroyed the political party systems. It destroyed the evolution which would have normally occurred of proven leaders succeeding them. And you know that for the next 13 years, there was no political activity, no elections. We now got into the army situation. Now, again, it was a very bloody coup, the first one, January 66. It was even bloodier, the second one, in July 1966. And at the end of that, the country was really torn apart. And maybe there'll be specific questions, because one was already a permanent secretary. One had sworn an oath to defend Nigeria, its unity and progress and so forth and so on, before Dr. Azikiwe, who was president, ceremonial president in 1965. And then we had this coup and very short-sighted, ill-considered attempt at unification under Ironsi. Then we had this counter-coup in July, very bloody, which led to pogroms and created the problems which led to the Civil War. And that was very tragic. But even after that Civil War, thanks to the 3R program, which was conceived well in advance, the rehabilitation, reconciliation, and reconstruction. Nigeria, and no victor, no vanquished. Nigeria resumed quick progress. And from 1970 to 1975, the economy was growing at 11.75% per annum. If that had been sustained even for 10 years, we would have become an African lion amongst, or tiger amongst the Asian tigers, because we were at par at that time. But it didn't happen. And then, more tragically, they inherited civil service from the British. And this is what has helped India and Pakistan, because even in Pakistan where they had coups, they didn't destroy the civil service. We, unfortunately, in 1975, saw 10,000 civil servants, more than 95% of them, according to Pedro Martins, the Monsignor, who was a chaplain in the Nigerian army, who was asked to look at it again. More than 95% of them did not deserve to. And so the destruction and degradation of the public service, which if it hadn't happened, might have been able, like we were able, after the second coup in July 1966, for 2 or 3 days, there was no effective government in Nigeria, but the Federal Civil Service managed to preserve order. And the police then too was good, wasn't destroyed. But there we were. After these destructions in 1975, we who were growing at 11.75% per annum stagnated. In fact, until the 1979, it didn't grow up more than 2%. 1980, it was even negative. So this is the background leading to our dreams not being realized in a way. But there are more details, which if questions asked, we'll answer them.
Thank you very much, sir. Wasn't it a bit curious that in 1959 or so, despite having the majority in the House, Azikiwe opted to be a ceremonial president other than being prime minister or putting in place the necessary political structure to be prime minister? I'm told that Olo offered to be deputy prime minister or finance minister and have them have a coalition. Are you conversant with that background, sir?
Not quite, but the point is this, that he did say, Awolowo, that he was prepared to serve under Zik, with Zik at Premier. But because of what had happened in 54 and all that, the Western NCNC, led by Adeniro Ogunsanyan and Tos Benson, vetoed that idea. But before then, A.G. Leventis had come from Accra, where he was based, and was trying to campaign that we should have a united government of the three parties. I think the NCNC didn't mind, but the action group was not prepared for that. And in fact, Leventis thought that was the end of the country, that refusal to have a united government of the three parties. But the NCNC, yes, Zik may not have minded because it was, but the Western NCNC were not in favor. And that didn't go on. And then in the end, but the curious thing is that, yes, if NCNC had agreed to work with Action Group, they had a majority. Because although the NCNC had more members than Action Group in the East and West combined, the Action Group was able to get about 18 seats in the Adamawa region. And so if they had combined, there would have been a majority. The North, of course, had its 130-something people, you know. But that didn't happen because of what had happened earlier on in, you know, as I explained, 54, 57, and the fact of saying that is, you know, the chief who was now, Chief Ighodalo, who was now saying was prepared to work with Zik, you know, who had talked about the ethnic, putting Nigeria as a federation with ethnic units as the members of the federation. Well, I don't know. This may have influenced also, apart from whatever happened, may have influenced the thinking of people like Uzoma and who incidentally was for many years president of the King's College Old Boys Association. King's College people tended to have featured quite a bit in these matters, you know, and so that was that, you know. It's a pity because I don't know, I believe that if Zik had the personality, you get along, you know, and if you ever met him once, he would know, he will forever remember your face, he will remember your name, and when he embraced you, subsequently, people will think you were longtime friends. So I think he might have been able to paper over the differences. But there again, the British played a role in this, because when the workers led by the Nigerian Railway Union strike of 1945 caught the British unawares, it is on record that the trade union people were meeting with Zik and co up to 2 in the morning and 3 in the morning. And Zik's papers were, of course, very supportive of the strike. And what did the British do? They closed down Daily Comet somewhere, but they left Pilot alone, but put a censor. And what was Zik doing? Very provocatively, you see a headline: the blood of the tree of liberty is watered by blood of tyrants. And then you see 3 columns for 6 inches blanked out. Say the censor removed this. That's provocative. 2, he then, you know, they had these meetings with the trade unions. He then published assassination, true or false. He said the pilot man who manned the radio was able to intercept a secret message. Is that possible? Secret message of the colonial office saying that Zik should be assassinated. Well, the British intelligence service works differently, you know, but that if it was enough to try him, but what did they do? They left Zik alone. They took all his lieutenants, Nauro, Sadzungo, Mokugo Okoye, and people like that, and jailed them. If Zik had been jailed, like happened in India with Gandhi and this thing, he would have emerged from jail a national hero. And that might have made us not even have to debate about a united party taking over independence. Later on, thinking Ghana was a smaller thing to handle, when they jailed Nkrumah, Nkrumah emerged as overwhelming national hero. So did they knowingly deny us a hero? You know, I don't know. But that's one of the ifs of our history. So it's a pity. I don't know. It might have worked out. It might not worked out if what you say, if they had put the NPC in opposition and you had a Southern-dominated coalition ruling Nigeria after independence, instead of what some people had campaigned for, a united government of all the three parties. So there is this.
All right, sir. I'm just going to ask another question. Quite a lot of people seem to be eager to ask a few questions, and I would like to throw the floor open shortly. But what we want to look at now is the way ahead, the way ahead. What do we do now in this economy that we're in? We're heavily borrowed. We are not producing. We're monoproduct, oil only. We've been blessed. Let me use that word. We've been blessed with a lot of leaders who have not delivered to us the dividends of democracy. You ran for office yourself. Nigerians or the party did not select you. What now is the way ahead? We are fractionalized. Boko Haram here, there, everywhere. Bombing of pipelines all over the place. Two dominant parties, PDP, APC. Money politics all over the place. Quality of leadership not too enthusiastic, not too enthusing. Let me use that word. What do we do as Nigerians? What do we do on this platform? What do we do as individuals to what is the way ahead?
I had hoped for years. There's a great role waiting for a player. Some visionary leader who will come again and do for us what fighting for independence did. That was an anchor. Everybody agreed on that. The tragedy of Nigeria is that since then, we've had no uniting anchor. A visionary leadership which would insist on moving Nigeria from where we are today to first world status and global significance. I had hoped that it would be an elected president. And we had, behind the scenes, made suggestions and all that. It didn't come to pass because, unfortunately, since this Fifth Republic started on the wrong foot. Money played too great a role. So people have gone into political office as investments. Some sold houses, their assets. And of course, if you have invested, your first thing is to have returns. But the history of great nations, which we read about, it's not the history of the richest people from time to time. It's the history of people with ideas, with this thing, trying to push their country forward. Now, that can't happen with this kind of political leadership. I don't know if I told you the story, but where being a member of Board of Trustees, so-called, because I campaigned and sought office, we had a meeting of Board of Trustees. This was around 2000. And I told them then that PDP was not a party. In fact, there is no party in Nigeria, but parties have to articulate issues. This is where we want to take the country, campaign on it and all that. So they set up a special committee. Jerry Garner was the secretary. And we met and made a conclusion how we can set about now organizing ourselves in the proper sense of a party to be imitated by other parties, not only PDP. Unfortunately, I was away for 1 week, during which the Board of Trustees met, but the president and vice president were there. Obasanjo and Atiku. And there they said that our recommendations to articulating issues, making a manifesto for a party and so forth and so on, was opposition. Opposition. Can you imagine? That is when I ceased to belong. And as soon as it was convenient, I was away from it, and I've not been a member of the party. You see, so this group, before COVID, I was amongst the elders who were consulting behind the scenes. 2 or 3 of us have gone, not because of COVID, because of old age. And we were looking, how can we get idealistic, intelligent, capable youth across the divides? Just 12 each from each state would suffice. Get them to unite. So my way forward now, and by youth, by the way, I mean people between 25 and 67. Because at 67, you still have more than 10 years of vigorous life before you, normally. Get them to unite, but not just unite because we want power, but they must be united against a 20-year long-term vision of how to transform Nigeria from where we are to a first world status and global significance. Vision 2010 did a great thing. And one of my greatest failures was as chief economic advisor, I could not persuade the president to implement it because it was formulated under President Abacha. You know, how they must be united behind that. If they are, they have the demographic strength, they have the voter strength, and as was demonstrated up in Obama's first running for president in America, if 30 to 40 million of them contribute 10,000 naira each, they will be able to spend some of the so-called godfathers, you know. But even on that, there are certain things which we can start now. Educational, on the educational front, because the idea of 11 million people out of school, the idea of degraded institutions, education is no longer good quality, no longer functional, so on and so on, then the country cannot get anywhere. There are many basic things to do. They will unite against a plan for this medium and long-term economic planning. They will be committed to good governance in terms of embracing justice for all and quick administration of justice. They'll be committed to education, infrastructure, and all that sort of development, you know. And on this basis, unite behind one, maximum 2 parties. Not like in 2019. I think there were about 9 young people, different parties, you know, and you can't get anywhere like that. So if we stand ready, if they want to debrief us, if they want us to tell them how we got on, and of course, the pillars I gave you, I talked about education, I talked about national plan, rule of law and natural justice and so on and so on. And also reconstructing and remotivating the civil service and the public services. Because it doesn't matter how good your ideas, if you don't have people capable of delivering them, we'll get nowhere. So the way forward, as I see it, is hopefully across all the divides, and I'm quite hopeful because I meet some young people, different races, different religion, different that. I mean, not different races, different ethnic groups, if you like, because luckily for us, we are one race, you know. We are one race, you know, not several. But as Somali shows, without that leadership, without the plan, without agreement on where you're going, even being one race, one religion, speaking one language. Look at the situation in Somalia. So this sitting down, working out a plan, and we can help behind the scenes. But it seems we must pray and persuade and have a way that avoid violence as much as possible, of persuading some of the present political activists to step aside. Let us have a group of people committed to long-term plans, to rule of law, to improving the quality of interchange amongst people in Nigeria so that we can resume rapid progress. And the destination, which if it was only resources alone, there is no country as blessed as Nigeria in such small space with the unique geographical advantage we have to be very prosperous, successful country. And as Zeke dreamt in his 1937 Renaissance Africa, put Nigeria back as the vanguard of African Renaissance.
That is a brilliant suggestion, sir. The only challenge, though, is finding these 12 people across board that will unite behind a selfless and common vision of Nigeria. Do you know any of such people in your trajectory and in your work? Do you have a list?
We've met quite a few young people who really, and I think they are meeting. In fact, I was happy when the NSAS movement showed that they were managing to meet across all the divides. It was a tragedy that it was forced underground, because if it hadn't gone that way, then we openly would have identified these people we can work with, you know, but they are there. And again, I'm very sad because I don't know if I said so earlier on, but in 2016, February, one of the delegations I led to see the current president when he was elected was of retired federal PAMSECs. And we went there, he had committed himself to three key things. Said anti-corruption, infrastructure development, and I think the third one was what? Economy also. And these younger retired PAMSECs, not those of us who retired, you know, in 75, but these younger ones still knew the capable, idealistic people, you know, and we urged, and he gave instructions then that there should be a manpower audit. Let us select 90 of these brilliant, willing people, put them in 3 agencies to help deliver on the program. He gave the instruction, nothing has happened, you know. And we must go back that route, you see. And so there are there, and we hope that they assure me, 1 or 2 of them, that they are still meeting and conversing. I hope that sooner or later, we'll be able to identify them, have COVID should abate, and we can resume our conversations, you know, so that they can then formulate what they can unite against.
Thank you very much, sir. Let me ask a few questions. 4 people want to ask questions. Ikechi Ayeroche, Prince Ben Ikani, Femi Olowe, Kofo Koka, and Ibrahim Pam. We take those first set of questions, and then we take it from there. Maegbo, Ayo, Eroche, please. Please unmute yourself. Olu, allow people to unmute. Thank you.
Yes, I've unmuted myself. Sir, it's a big pleasure having you on this program today, sir. And if I recollect very well, sir, you were into the Nigerian government when Tafawa Balewa became prime minister again. Awolowo ended up becoming opposition leader. I would have thought that NCNC, having been the party with the next majority, how Zik did not end up being the opposition leader at that time, and it fell on Awolowo. I think that was after the 1964 election. Abubakar became the prime minister, Awolowo became opposition leader, and I think Zik ended up becoming Governor General of Nigeria. Now that's one question, sir. Then my second question, sir, is this. I don't know whether you attended the Aburi meeting with the military governors then. That was led by Lieutenant Colonel Yakubu Gowon, where a meeting was held that Nigeria should be a confederation. And then they came back to Nigeria, something else happened. Nobody knows how everything that happened in Aburi did not end up happening again in Lagos. That is 2. And then the last one, the third one, sir. How is it? I mean, government said reconstruction, or let's say no victor, no vanquished in the 67, 70 war, civil war. How come at the end of the day, the Easterners were given only £20 to sustain themselves and their family, and that with all the money they had lost during the war? Thank you, sir. I think at least you were a PAM Sec at that point in time. So those are my 3 questions, sir.
Yes. Well, first, Zik didn't become leader of opposition. This is what I told you. You know, we go back a bit again. When the Action Group government in the West prevented Zik going to the House of Reps, you know, they blocked him because NCNC had said Olorunimbe will be mayor of Lagos, Zik and Adedoyin would go to the House. The Action Group prevented Zik going. Now, 3 years later, when there was direct election, by then Zik was not available. He had become premier in the East. That I will explain to you later. Now, when there was direct election 3 years later, NCNC won in the West. So, of the 9 Nigerian ministers, 6 were from NCNC, 3 from the East, 3 from the West, and 3 from the North. If Zik had been amongst those 6, when it came to appointing a prime minister or a premier for Nigeria in 1957, would they easily have overridden him and made Balewa? I wonder. But that didn't happen. Now, on the question of how did Zik go to the East, when, I don't know if you know, we don't publish history, but the under Yoita, Mwapa and Co., you had some people who refused to take party instructions. And they quoted what had happened in England when Attlee became Labour Premier, but people like Arolaski and Co. were in the party outside. And the British said there were certain things you got to know as a cabinet minister, which is not available to the party. So the party cannot dictate from outside to the British Prime Minister. They quoted it in Nigeria and refused to obey the party. The party then had to defeat the budget produced by Yoita and the sit-tight, they call them sit-tight ministers. It defeated it. And so the new government had to be formed. Zik then nominated Orizu. The colonial people dug up their records and they said, and they accused Orizu of having taken money for scholarships and misapplied it and sent him to jail for 7 years. So he was no more available to become premier. And that was when Zik now went to the East as premier. Now, the point is, that is on that number one. Now, on the number two, Aburi Accord. General Gawan, and he's still alive, thought they were going to meet as officers together with a fellow officer, Ankara, and then agreed to go back to Nigeria and sort out things properly. He did not tell the secretary to the government until 2 days before. He thought this was just a meeting to break the ice, come back home. So when he now told late Ejuechi, secretary to government, he said, can't go there without preparing properly for a meeting. So not myself, not Aida, not Abdullah Atta, no permanent secretary accompanied him and the secretary to the government. Secretary to the government, who was then way, to the Aburi meeting. The late Akenzwa, who was a senior officer, more or less like one of the senior private secretaries, went and he took the records, as it was. Now, when they now got to Accra, several permanent secretaries, some who had left federal to contribute this, were there with Ojukwu, well-produced papers on what they wanted, and so forth and so on. Our people didn't go with that. Anyway, they went, they agreed, they would bury Iransi, they would change the name from head of Supreme Commander or something, to head of federal military government, whatever it is, and came back. When they now came back with this document, the permanent secretaries sat down and looked at it and showed that if these things were fully implemented, Nigeria had ceased to exist. But I want to tell you people that despite that, there were one or two things, like you cannot send an ambassador except there's unanimity in the Supreme Military Council. You cannot promote somebody super scale, that is, in those days, senior assistant secretary upwards, except there is unanimity. If a country attacks Nigeria, the three different armies have to meet together and agree whether they will respond or not. If And that was reflected in the decree to implement the Aburi Accord. If instead of just saying on Aburi we stand, they had read between the lines and accepted that decree, Nigeria would have ceased to exist within 3 months. There would have been paralysis. If some of you are aware of history of Europe, there was a time a member of Polish parliament could veto anything. And of course, during that time, they were occupied by several countries. It would have been paralysis, you know. But despite that, the decree, I think it was number 8 of 1967, whatever, you know, if you look at it, we still had those clauses about unanimity in making ambassadors, unanimity in promoting people to superscale, which were really the senior officers who drove the system, and unanimity in response to military incursions. If it was accepted, of course, Nigeria would have been at war within 3 months, but nobody would have been able to know who is commanding who. It would have been like the Somali situation. Now, the third thing was the 3 R's, no victor, no vanquished, and the 20 pounds this thing. Now, that 20 pounds was for people who had not operated their accounts. I mean, people who had operated their accounts. If you didn't operate your account, you were not caught in that 20,000. But I agree with you that in choosing 20 pounds, considering that some people had to move in money and move out money, you know, it was not very fair. But despite that, remember, people came back to Lagos. Their rents had been collected by some friends, given to them. Within a few months, the Eastern presence in our economy was practically reestablished. It's only in Port Harcourt that the abandoned property affair was really very bad and shouldn't have happened, but it happened. But what I want to say is that despite that, 3 of us, late Aida, late Jordan, myself, within 6 weeks, once they put the Bailey Bridge back to connect, reopen Niger Bridge, we took Federal Mercedes FGN and went to Onitsha market to see how things were moving. Because and up to Oka, you see the feeding program and all that. And you wouldn't believe it, I expected them to be seeing FGN car, some people to be hostile. And then I would speak, since I'm from Asaba, I would then speak in Igbo to them, you know. But that didn't need to happen. What we saw there was people applauding us. They were looking forward to their own, you know, and things were orderly. And I tell you, as permanent secretary in charge of oil matters, when we wanted to do a study to, you know, debating in OPEC, we wanted to do a study to show how little of the money from oil, came to producers, you know. I appointed the firm of Scoop and Company, led by Okibo, Pius Okibo, one of the best minds, most brilliant people of our generation, not just in Nigeria. and he was there with Ugo as assistant. They did the thing, and they were integrated back into this thing. But I agree, 20 pounds, despite what had happened. But mark you, under the Biafran currency, meat was scarce, and a dried lizard was costing about 300 to 400 pounds. So be that as you like, but I agree that was not too good. But all the same, they were able to come back into the economy. And a few months later, by the time we went between Jalingo and Mambila, the old Eastern lorries were back, helping them carry things and so forth and so on. So it was the 3R, this thing was substantially successful. The rehabilitation, reconciliation, and reconstruction. I tell you personally, with a friend, one of the late PAMSECs, we went to Asaba about 10 days before the end of the Civil War. We crossed over to Onitsha. General Wushishi just died, was the rear commander. He took us to CKC front, and we could hear desultory gun exchanges. And we said, what's happening? He told us the war was really ended. They had been hesitant about going into Newi because, what the tragic genocide at Asaba and so forth and so on. They didn't know what might happen. But there it was. We came back, and so I believe the 3 R's were, in the most part, implemented and were quite successful. And people were integrated into work jobs and all that, So those are the 3 questions.
Yeah, correct, sir. So we'll take Prince Ikani, Femi Olowe, and Kofo at once, sir, if you don't mind. But let's limit it to 1 question each, if you don't mind. 1 question each, so that others can have a chance. There's quite a lot of hands up. So Prince Ben, Femi Olowe, Kofo, and maybe Ibrahim will take 1 question each, sir. Go ahead, unmute yourself, sir.
Okay. Good evening, Pastor. And
good evening, Prince.
Chief Speaker. It's a privilege to be here. My question, so that I can ask quickly, is that the present day civil service and your time, the difference is clear. Because we used to know that civil service is the engine room of government. But what we have now is short of that glory. What do you think should be the way forward, since we are talking of solution now? And secondly, sir, the issue of election rigging, from a book I've read, some of us were not born during the first election and during independence. We are told that even the British aided rigging. In a book of Chinua Achebe I read, once Harold Smith, a junior civil servant, was detailed by the Governor General Robertson that time to make sure that the election is rigged one way or the other. Sir, with the benefit of hindsight, I'm asking, sir, was that election rigged? And if it was rigged, don't you see that that spirit of rigging is still in existence in Nigeria? Without proper recruitment of leadership, we can never get a solution. Because when the foundation is faulty, the building cannot stand. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Prince. Femi Olowe, please. Unmute yourself.
Okay, good evening, sir, and thank you for the opportunity. Okay, so my question, so first, I was in primary six in 1998, and I know for sure that my dad has always instilled, the spirit of listening to news, watching TV, network news at night, and also reading newspaper. So at that point, I realized that Zeke, I can't remember his age then, but at some point, he was pronounced dead. And after 2 hours, we heard that, he resuscitated, he didn't die. And between that 1988 and year 1999 or 2000, I think such occurred like about 2 times. At different points, they said he resuscitated. But going by the history, I remember that Awolowo was not also buried, was not committed to the Mother Earth, and he was preserved. And also in his, I can't remember that place in the Kenya where he was buried, but not committed to the earth, not covered with sand. So, and I remember that on the day that the family agreed to bury Awolowo, then Zeke was pronounced dead that same day. So my question is that being the foremost and elderly man that you have been in the history of Nigeria, are you aware of any link, maybe spiritual link between Chief Obafemi Awolowo and former President Zeke? If the answer is yes, does it mean that was what actually led to the closeness of the duo, and the reason why one could say, go for the position of a president, I will hold the position of Federal Minister of Finance? Was that the reason why there was an accord between the two of them? And if this is also yes, don't you think that such agreement, such spiritual, or I don't want to use the word cult. Don't you think that if such still exists today in the midst of our politicians, there could be some issues because blood is thicker than water. Spiritual alignment is thicker than just ethnicity, just some closeness. That is my question.
Thank you very much, Femi. I think I know the answer to that one, but I'll leave Uzoma to speak for himself since he knew both men. Kofo, please, your question. Femi, that's a very deep question you're asking there. Kofo.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Mine is just about clarification. Sir, you mentioned that a study was done in 1975 that says that about 90% of the civil service were now deserving. So I'd just like some clarification. Were they incapable of performing their duties? Were they unqualified, or were they socially unsuitable for their jobs? I just would like some clarification. Thank you.
Okay, I can answer that also, but I'll leave Uzoma to respond to that. Ibrahim, please. Unmute yourself. Unmute yourself.
Sorry, I was trying to do that, but there's a problem. Floria Collegium, sir. Very difficult to have the opportunity to speak with you for only 2 or 3 hours, but such a privilege. I would have a few questions, but I'll just ask one, and it has to do with your references to the Civil War, and particularly your passing reference to the massacre in Asaba in 1967. My question, sir, is what is your view of national reconciliation, broadly speaking, within the context of the embers of conflict that Nigeria is still grappling with, especially given the fact that because, and this would be my proposition to you, because we have not addressed underlying conflicts, and because we have not remediated losses, except maybe through the Oputa panel effort, there seems to be an unending resort to conflict and to division. So I'd really love to hear your view about how Nigeria can overcome this recurring obstacles in our national endeavor. Thank you, sir. I'd love to hear about national industrial policy, given that you were Sec for industries, but maybe that will wait for another time. Thank you, sir, for it.
Well,
Good.
Ibrahim, you sneaked it in, so maybe you respond to it. Stylishly sneaked it in. Okay, sir, over to you, sir. There are about 4 or 5 questions there on your plate.
Oh, yes. The Prince talked about the present-day civil service. Somebody referred to as Prince Ben.
Yes,
the first
Prince Ben.
question.
Correct.
The present-day civil service, what's the way forward? You know, when I told you that when my late friend was made the chairman of transition committee, you know, transitional council, when the current president was first elected, I sent him a paper on restructuring, motivation, remotivating, and reorienting the civil service. I think first it has to start with whoever becomes president and head of federal military government agreeing that the civil service is useful. You have to, because if there is no political commitment at the highest, you cannot do much. If he agrees to that, civil service in our days was merit-driven. He would also agree that we have to bring back all the things which enable the civil service to be merit-driven. When 2 or 3 colleagues were coming from the north, Medjoda and Yusuf Kobiri and all that, the head of service there told them, it's a lot to learn. When you challenge people, they rise to the challenge. So we must abandon this arithmetical, mechanistic quota system. We go back, and in those days, you had to have a good honors degree to be in the administrative service. The administrative service was the service which, developed people for coordinating policies in the ministry. That is, inputs from the technical people, if it's in the Ministry of Works, the engineers, the architect, and all that. But to arrive at a government decision, you would assemble all that and agree. Then you got in. After so many months, you had to take an exam to see if you had familiarized yourself with civil service regulations and financial instructions, because there was emphasis on spending money only for what it was approved in the budget. And then, after a year or two, I went on a course. And later on, before you were, for 3 years, you never had an increment. After 3 years, if you were now confirmed as suitable material, you had what they used to call incremental jump. and then all those stages, we must go back to that orderly thing. And two, respect the results of it. Now, that apart, the disciplining, monitoring of behavior and all that, and you then, in the higher grades, you go for special courses, culminating in Imperial Defense College in those days, which we've built a place in Kuru. But the British who did that, they took people at the level of brigadier and deputy secretary, civil service, maybe one or two equivalents in the corporate sector. And after that, they knew they would have 10 more years to really use what they've learned to help us and to monitor and guide those coming. When I entered the civil service, you could see 3 or 4 people, white and black, say, I like to be like that. That was destroyed in 75. The good role models, you'll be sitting down for lunch, and you will hear on NTA that you are retired with immediate effect. And maybe they would explain to me now, but I've never got the explanation. They usually added with immediate effect an increase in alacrity. Something has happened and increased. Well, maybe you people can interpret to me what it means, but anyway, now so we must go back and have these orderly expectations, and people wrote courageously annual reports on their staff, those underneath them. And the Public Service Commission took this seriously because you have to make sure, so the first thing is commitment, political commitment. Then the second thing is going back to the studios, the processes of recruitment, not by quota. Minimum standards must be satisfied. And once you are recruited, your advancement should depend upon your performance, not on anything else. We must put that back. And if we do what we have to do in reinstating quality education at all the 3 levels, primary, secondary, tertiary, within a matter of 10 years, no state will be disadvantaged. So that is that. Now, the second question was on electioneering. Actually, you talk about rigging. Well, the rigging was not, if there was any rigging, I'm not aware. But what happened really, and you can see this even in Sherwood Smith's biography, autobiography, where he was resident Kano province, later on governor, and he spoke about how he took the hands of semi-literate people, holding them. This is where, having got cajoled from them, according to him, who will be the candidate, he then had to guide this illiterate's hand so that he doesn't put his thumb in the wrong place. Yes, as I told you, even from Clifford's time, the northern civil servants, British, were not keen on Nigerian integration. Economics and other things, of course, prevailed. But why they were so uneager, even when Lugard came from there and did the amalgamation, but Clifford and Cameron tried to bring them. It was only just before independence, before regional self-government, that they succeeded. So they did play those roles, but that didn't, it still didn't prevent how can you imagine? I've told you, the action group gave us very good government in the West. Scholarships, free education, water supply, health supply, and all that. Things which matter. But when there was chance for direct election, the popularity of NCNC prevailed. No rigging did, affected that. So despite this, the so-called rigging and all that, there's something obscuring the screen here. Anyway, despite all that, I told you how the Action Group Alliance got about 18 seats in the north, Dawaba area. And NEPU, I think, did manage to get 1 or 2 seats, the NCNC Alliance. So that rigging was not as destructive as what we have seen when it now became a battle of, I won't call them robbers, but when you are going to loot the treasury, what are you? Anyway, so that is that. So I don't think rigging was the critical issue. The critical issue was all these earlier signals. East can work with West, which was not true, and North and so forth and so on. And which, if you really, the average Nigerian, what does he want? He wants shelter, he wants food, he wants education for his children. If you give him this, does he ask you what's your tribe? So we can rise above that. And for the people who may not know, there was a time in England, in the Middle Ages, you were invited for dinner, Lord so and so. And the host decided he didn't like you, and cut off your head and sent to your wife at home. Did that prevent them from eventually becoming one country? And because they're one country, being great as they became. So whatever our past sufferings, we cannot just dwell on that. We should look, for the sake of our children and grandchildren, at the possibilities of Nigeria. And when they were discussing after the coups, people trying to pull apart, I did a little bit of research and I found, and this helped us during the Civil War in a way, found that the rate of growth in French West Africa and Equatorial Africa subsided when in 1958, they used to rule French West Africa from Dakar and rule Equatorial from Brazzaville, I think. But around 1958, with Loire Cadre, de Gaulle, they cut up French West Africa into 14 states and the other place into 4 states. Their rate of economic growth fell down. The money which SUA and CFAO were making in Nigeria was much, much better than what they were doing in those cut up individual countries. And this is why during the Civil War, there wasn't unanimity in the French establishment. Otherwise, Nigeria might have ceased to exist. The military-industrial complex somehow didn't agree with focus group in de Gaulle's cabinet, who were for support of Biafra all the way, and the other people not so keen. And that enabled us. We may not be able to buy ammunition for panhardts, which we had bought from the French just before the Civil War. But somebody will point out one country in Latin America which had bought it but can't use it, and you can go there. You know, those are things which we discuss in depth in another way. So that was that. And then now, what was the other thing?
Somebody was asking.
Yeah, the mausoleum. You were talking, somebody was talking about some kind of ritual link between declarations about Zeke's death and Awu and all that. No, this is my first time of hearing of that. We were around then, nobody told us that. No. Was it Mark Twain in America who somebody earlier on, this is before Nigeria, had proclaimed dead? You know, he wasn't dead. And he said, you know, he was a writer. He said, the story about my death is much exaggerated. You know, Zeke was proclaimed dead once or twice. And in fact, you know, the British papers do your obituary before you die. And NTA carried that Zeke was dead the last time. And you can't blame them, because a family led by Mbadiwe, a group led by Mbadiwe, went to NTA to talk about funeral arrangement or whatever it was. And when Zeke had it, he saw his name on TV. He said he thought they were talking about his birthday to come, until they said, may he rest in peace. So then he asked them to ask him, by the way, who instead of going to his family, went to television to talk about funeral. When last did he see him? Of course, you people may not remember that Mbadiwe led a group when they thought Zeke had boarded the boat to go to Europe. Zeke must go. I don't know if you are aware of it. When Zeke had it, the boat hadn't departed. So Zeke disembarked and did not go and faced the plotters and dealt with them. But later on, he readmitted one or two of them to the NCNC, including Mbadiwe. So he said, when last did he see me? Instead of going to my family to pay condolence, you go to NTA. Because why? Each one of them wanted to say Zeke's last word, whatever that word was. Maybe pastor, you can explain, you know? And so I had never heard of this linkage. Now, the people who did the mausoleum in Econ were trying to replicate what they did for Lenin in Moscow. You know, Lenin was preserved until Gorbachev's time for more than 70 years, or no, 60 years after his death. His body was still in that place. Of course, the way they preserve bodies there and the ambient temperature in Moscow is different. I understand that in Kenya, when they tried to open the door and they saw the army of rats in the place, there was nothing to keep anymore. And it was wiser to commit the poor man to Mother Earth. And that was that. But I didn't know about any of these spiritual linkages. It didn't affect us in our decisions in those days. Then the last question by Madame Kuka was 95%. Yes, when I said, when they now asked Monsignor Pedro Martins to look again, because many of those people announced retired, they're just people whose names were whispered to whoever was compiling a list. We have due processes in the civil service. You are accused, If it's very urgent, you're given only 24 hours to give your defense. You can even get a lawyer if you like. If it's not so urgent, you are given time. If these people needed to be disciplined, there was no such process. People just thought without the civil service, Gawan would not have been there. Not true. And therefore, and the media played their own role. In fact, this phrase, Super PAMSEC, was supposed to be abusive. Of course, it turned out different, but it wasn't in praise. It was invented to quote, insult, if you like. But that's that. The politicians also had their grudge. So the civil service was, hated by these various groups who thought they should be in power or be enjoying something which they were not enjoying. The people who removed Gawan in the end had for more than 3 years, even from the war front, they were wanting him to remove military governors, saying they were enjoying. They are suffering in the front. But everybody knows what really happened. In fact, these civil servants they accused, there was a time we were bold enough to tell General Gawan that even if he redeployed them, they are still in the army, subject to some discipline. Because some of them in the war front, the names of dead soldiers were not declared. And then you now want to come and deal with the state treasury and so forth and so on. But anyway, the 8 of them, if it was present day Nigeria, I would not be talking to you. But in those days, things were still okay. The 8 people got to know. So when they see you, they say, Jaka Jaka man, you say I should be retired. If it's today, what will happen? How much is it they pay these characters to finish people? Who would have been finished. But they all had their grouses. And in those days, the secret public service was a quiet service. Tendered advice secretly. We didn't think we would need to defend ourselves in public. So that was why when you accuse somebody of something, you go through due process. That was not gone through. And even as I said, in the case of 1 or 2 of us, said we retire him, we give him another job. And I was told 2 weeks before the announcements began, nothing against you, but you can't fit into the new image of PAMSEC, whatever image it was, I don't know. But thereafter, I was approached, said, can you send the name of people to be retired? And I told the PAMSEC who was sent, say, look here, the way I ran my ministry, if people needed to be disciplined, they wouldn't be waiting for a coup. 2, supposing I put somebody's name now, and that man gets to know later that I had already been told I myself was going. So, and at least didn't contain any people from my ministry. So, and when they first did the coup, a few of us were to be announced together with the generals, including the head of service, myself, a few people. It was the late Gobi and the late Damchida who prevailed on them that we have due process, please. So the rest is history, what transpired. But this is what was meant. More than many of these people, some were being recommended for promotion. Some were coming from courses with very, very good reports. They were included by people who didn't like them or who were envious, whispered their names. And there was this thing. In fact, there was a tragic case of somebody who had written people's names but didn't know that his name had been secretly put inside too. And when they had turned on the radio to listen to the names of the evildoers, he had his name mentioned. That it almost finished him. In any case, it did. So the whole purpose was that it was not an orderly process. And unfortunately, the academic people didn't say anything until it turned to them. I used to go with my friends, 2 or 3 friends, to meetings of NISA in Ibadan. It used to last all Friday, then we adjourn on Saturday, you know. So weekend. I went this day after the retirements. I started hitting, because I was retired as PAMSEC, but not as member of NISA Council, you know, because it's not same appointing authority. Meeting which used to last hours, so quiet. Within 2 hours, we finished. People were surprised to see me back at home, not after weekend, you know. And they were saying, what did they do? I said, this is the question you should have asked when they were ripping through the civil servants. So the answer really is that, unfortunately, there was a lot of misinformation, misunderstanding as to the role. You know, they wanted PAMSEC to become ministers after the coup of January. PAMSEC refused, said, you people are not supposed to be there forever, so on and so on. Now, you know, and it's we PAMSEC who were suggesting, please, get, for Nigeria to be taken seriously, get the political leaders whom people knew to come and join you, so that they know that this coup is not about destroying everything. Luckily, they agreed to do so just after the declaration of secession. If we didn't have people like Awolowo, Minukano, Briggs, etc., in the Nigerian government, and Ahoro, so you can say that these are the leaders, political leaders, with the government. So I think the diplomatic picture after secession would have been very different. You know, we leave it at that. But there we are. So that is why the massacre, if you like, the destruction of the civil service, from which we are still suffering. No mentoring, no sanctions. You know, talking about something, it went down to everything. For instance, when I was going to buy my first car, 1957, it was the British, the amount you could get as car loan was just okay. You could buy Morris Minor, you could buy Hillman, something, British cars. But I wanted Peugeot 403. It was £50 more than the loan. The head of my division had to external affairs. He had to call me. How are you going to find the £50? Because they were supposed to monitor you so you don't do anything which will oblige you to become corrupt. So I said, you know, I'm just coming from abroad. You have this £100 clothing allowance, which I have my winter suits already. You know, so I'm going to take them. And then in minute, Mr. Asiodu assures me you can find the £50 in the circumstances I approve. So you were monitored. It was also the case which we were told by President Obasanjo. who had used his savings from being in Congo to buy a car without applying for a loan. Somebody buying a car without applying for a loan? A British man who was commanding their unit subjected him to a little court-martial tribunal to explain. He was able to show. And then that man, because it wasn't a hostile affair, it was just a normal monitoring of junior officers to make sure they don't step out of bounds. He explained to them, these are my savings, my passport, and so forth and so on. And the man then explained to him, you don't use your money for that. You could get this loan at this interest, buy your car and save that, do something with it. So it wasn't a malicious investigation. It was just friendly guidance in a way. And this is how we manage. So we have to return to those nuances and understandings. And then you have a happy service. And as I told you, the good ministers looked for the good officials because they knew what help they could give them. And we must return to that.
Ibrahim asked about reconciliation, sir, and also something to do with the industrialization of Nigeria. Maybe I'll allow you to take those questions, and then we might need to close because our time is so fast.
The reconciliation I talked about, when somebody asked about 20, I said it worked well. Which aspect of reconciliation? First, except for one or two very senior officials, people came back to their posts everywhere, federal. Two, even those who came back, some in the army too, some later on were promoted. The top ones, of course, were not the junior people are taking their posts and so on and so on. And I told you how we cooperated with all the minds who could help. And Sylvester Ugo, I think that was his first name, was the governor of the Bank of Biafra, wasn't he? I think he was. But he was in Scoop and Company, whom we used for consultancy on all matters in my time. And it was the same Ugo who became running mate with Tofa to be vice president, wasn't it? So I don't know which aspect of reconciliation. In Asaba, because you mentioned Asaba in particular, where I come from, where apparently my brother, youngest brother, who was Olympic athlete, was killed. Now, that was a very sad case, but the background must be told. You know that everywhere from Abo to Asaba was known as Asaba Division in the old maps. And when these people were joining the army, all the Nzogu from Opanam, the Okwechimes, the Majes, every one of them put Asaba as where it came from. So there may have been some elements, like Paul Mohammed is not here to defend himself, who must have felt that when they get to Asaba, they will deal with them. Fortunately, the Asaba people too had some of the oldest pensioners, people like the father of Justice Ituah, and one Mr. Modi, and so forth and so on. And they told them to come and welcome them, because even it's true that you say Asaba is Igbo speaking, but if you went to Asaba 200 years ago, you wouldn't be speaking Igbo. You would speak something like they speak in a book, a mixture of Igala and, one or two other languages. So when they now came to Asaba, people, as usual, put on white cloth, going to welcome this thing. They did not know that late Colonel Taiwo had planned something else. Apparently, it was deliberate, but it wasn't told to the headquarters. We got to know later. Even I didn't know that my brother was dead, because I kept asking those who took over, please find him. But apparently he was one of those slaughtered in a house. So the government here wasn't quite fully aware what happened. Later on, people trickled back, started saying, and we realized the immensity, what had happened. And it did not help the federal cause, because the propaganda was that if federal succeeded, there'll be genocide. And here you are now, killing people on the bridge, people who came to welcome you. Guns were hidden in camouflage, and they separated the little children under 11, I think. Boys under 11 and women and girls were separated. Any man who was male and above 12 and then suddenly the leaves disappeared, the machine guns came, and they gunned down these people. It was terrible. Yes, but there it was. Understand that in one or two other villages downriver that happened. But, so the predictions were that, after the war, there would be genocide and lynchings and all that. Drawing on what happened in Spain and what happened in America. Wasn't it only about 30 or 40 years ago they finally settled the matter in America? But thank God, it wasn't so here. We were a bit lucky. People in Asaba paid a big price, but that was not repeated in Nnewi or Weri or anywhere after the surrender of Biafrans. And we are grateful to God for that.
Thank you very much, sir. And our time really is deeply fast spent. And what this means is that we have to bring you back at some stage in the near future so that we can really benefit from your wealth of knowledge and experience. We want to thank everyone that has been on the platform today and for those very useful questions. If the questions are critical, you can send them to us by email, and we'll pass them on to Chief Asiodu and send a response back. But definitely we will have him back in the not too distant future, where we can properly advertise and then really take many, many questions and clarifications and drink from his well of knowledge and experience. But as a parting shot, sir, for tonight, what really is the way ahead? Does Nigeria have a future? Should we be looking for foreign passports and going to Australia and Canada? And do you think that people of our generation can sort ourselves out and bring back that glory that you all saw in Nigeria? What will be your parting shots on that, sir?
My honest view is that we must not give up hope. Many great countries have passed through tragedies in the past. You can't mention any great country where certain terrible things haven't happened. But we must have a revolutionary change of mind amongst those who want to lead us. And here I'm hoping that people of the age bracket I've talked about will continue their consultations and would agree that we must have a long-term plan. We must move from where we are today to first world status and global significance. That's one. We must embrace good governance in all its aspects: rule of law, sanctity of contracts, quick administration of justice, sanctions to be applied. We must pay great emphasis to education. And when we were full of hopes, I was hoping that within 1 year or two of the establishment of the Youth Corps, which was successful in bringing Nigerians together who probably had gone from primary to university in one town, not in our days when our fathers were posted all over the country and grew up knowing many tribes, that would introduce a language policy. This is not abolishing English as official language, but all we wanted was that, like today, if you're lucky, your parents speak the same Nigerian language, you learn it. But wherever you start school, you learn that language, usually. At the age of 10, English is introduced. But what we wanted was that at the age of 12 or 13, when you enter a secondary school, if you're in the north, the northerner, you must choose one southern language. Chances they will choose Igbo or Yoruba. If you're in the south, you must choose one northern language, which the school will be equipped, like in the unity schools, to teach you, And so within 10 years, well-educated Nigerians, when they meet, they have their mother tongue, they have the local tongue, where they grew up. And apart from English, they will now have 1 or 2 Nigerian languages they can speak together, like present-day Switzerland, whether you're Italian Swiss or French Swiss or German Swiss. So we're hoping, and if you can meet yourselves, speak English with the foreigner or French, but after that, break into a Nigerian language, you've gone to the same type of schools. We are luckily one race. We are under pressures of globalization. We dress alike, And if we go back to a merit-driven system, which education will enable you to, meaning that public standards, public school education must be upgraded again. Teachers paid better, respected better, and so forth. If we do that, would ethnicity be that important? And if our economic program is succeeding, and we're all relatively prosperous where we are. So this is my prayer, that the young people should continue their contacts. I see you have things like #FixPolitics. You have, I saw one of the presidential candidates and I challenged him. I said, why? People have come out again. Last time there were 9 of you. Can't you unite? He says they are consulting. Hope so. We pray so. But that when they now consult, some of the people say join one of the existing parties, even if they had their own party and is one. Listening to repeating the demographic facts, voter strength, and the contributions. That is my hope. Then, willy-nilly, the people who have been in politics since the Fifth Republic as a business would agree to step aside. That is my prayer and my hope. And those of us who are still around, we're quite happy. So what do you people call it in Microsoft English? Mentor, the debriefers, and contribute to that process. God has endowed this country enormously, giving us a unique geographical position. Asians have to do 11,000 miles to access European and Eastern United States markets. We 3,500. We have everything here, all the raw materials and energy. We should be one of the most prosperous countries in the world. And with prosperity, education, merit, tribalism will recede. And we'll be a united, prosperous country. And as in Vision 10, they talked about a caring, democratic country, affording means of life affordable to everybody. And that is the Nigeria we pray for. And it is not difficult. Just 3-4 years of treading this path. Absence of impunity, justice to everybody, good visionary leadership, good governance, and we will not fall back again. And we pray. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. God bless you, sir. Floriat, we will be knocking on your door again, and I will come and see you to deepen some of this conversation and maybe pick up a few of those names from you so that we can push this movement forward. I think it's critical. I think it's important. I think we all have everything to lose if we don't try, and everything to gain if we just simply try. I want to thank everybody for being on the platform. I see a lot of great names here. Matt, good to see you. Mommy Adegore, great to see you. Folusho, Mike Fadeomi, great to see you. Shade, thank you so much. Prime Surgical, thank you. Kalu Idika Kalu, sir. Good to see you, sir. Floriat, wonderful. This place is bombarded with King's College boys. Emeka Wogu, good to see you. Falabi Ajida, God bless you. Have a very wonderful evening. Thank you for staying.
Good night. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much,
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good.
Good to see you. Nii Seidu, Richard Name, good to see you. Mrs. Franklin, how are you? God bless you all. Auntie Emilia, God bless you. Marie Owele, good to see you, sir. God bless you. I'm sure that gave you some nostalgia. Ituah, good to see you. Deji Sule, Bao Neo, Ekuolao, Alaba, thank you. Good to see you. Ihoma, Kedu, Dakwo, troublesome lady. Peace and love. Bamiki Mommy. All right. Bye-bye. God bless you all.